So what leads to suicidal behaviour?
So suicide is a very, very complex behaviour, and it has multiple pathways that lead to that behaviour, and there are a vast array of risk factors for suicidal behaviour. I think just before we talk about the risk factors for suicidal behaviour, it's useful to consider that for young people there is a particular context in which suicidal behaviours may be likely to emerge just because they're young. So young people, for example, their limbic system, which is all about feelings and emotions, is very well developed. So they feel emotions very intensely. But their frontal lobe, which is where you have basically the brakes and the problem-solving capacity and the high-level decision-making, that doesn't develop until people are about 26 years old. So they feel emotions very intensely, but they're not able necessarily, they don't have the cognitive capacity yet to solve problems that maybe occur because of their emotions. The other thing to remember about young people is that they are not very, just because of developmentally where they are, they're not necessarily able to see the future clearly. And and they don't have life experience. So if there is a relationship breakup, for example, they think that that is the worst thing that's ever happened in the world to anyone, and no one else has ever been through anything like that, and no one else could possibly understand what they're experiencing. Sadly, those of us who are a bit older know that probably in your lifetime you're going to go through several breakups, and you will survive and you will get through them. But to a young person, especially the first time it happens, and they feel, as I said, very intensely, then it's absolutely the end of the world. And they just don't have the capacity to see into the future and to understand that sort of stuff. So, young people, if you're 17, 29 is utterly ancient. And I mean, 35, you may as well be on crutches and in a wheelchair. So that sets them up to seeing the future as being hopeless, because they really can't see them surviving into the future. The other things to remember about the context of young people is that they're very, very peer influenced as teens, and they're also fascinated. They have a morbid fascination around suicide. At the same time, young people simply do not understand the finality of mortality. They don't understand the finality of death. And in part, this is because they don't see well into the future. What else was I going to say? They are very susceptible to peer behaviours. I was going to say that it's worth remembering for young people that are fascinated by death, that if another young person dies of their age, then in about a third of the cases that will be a suicide death, because young people are physically very healthy. In another third of the cases, the death will be from a motor vehicle crash, and in only a third of the cases will there actually be a physical reason for a youth death. So to young people, 1 out of 3 deaths of people that they know is suicide, and they see it as much more common than in fact it is. And on top of that, suicide has a contagious element to it, and young people are often in schools and polytechs and universities and institutions, and those are the very places where contagious behaviours are likely to happen, where you have a socially enmeshed group of young people, all very much alike, and if someone does something, then other people will copy that. I think it's very useful to think about all of those contextual issues. On top of that, I would add our current context, because we're currently living through the digital revolution, which has had a massive impact in the space of 10 years, basically, 2011 and the introduction of the iPhone, a massive impact on the way people live their lives. On top of that, we've got concerns about climate change and rapid climate change. And on top of that, we've added now the biggest pandemic that the world has ever seen, and it is an overused word, but it is absolutely unprecedented. And we don't know how much longer that's going to go on for. People think they've made sacrifices. We've dealt with Delta, and now here comes Omicron, for example. How much longer is it going to go on for? If you marry those major life factors and contexts that young people are now living in, with the fact that they are hopeless about the future, we now end up with young people being highly anxious, and my impression is that amongst quite a number of young people, there's a pervasive negativity about the world. I've got massive student debt. I don't know about the security of my job with COVID issues. I'll never be able to afford to buy a house. Do you want to bring children into this world if they're going to fry with climate change? It adds up to a very negative environment.